It was before YouTube. People had to copy and paste video into email, and I still went viral. This is the story behind the story. George Bush and sovereignty. It was a steamy day on August 6, 2004 in Washington, D.C. At the end of a very eventful day, I went to the front desk of my hotel to check messages. There was a stack of messages back when they had paper and it said, "While you were out." There was phone calls to return, and as the clerk handed them to me, she asked, "Who are you?" I had gone viral along with President George W. Bush. This was in the early days of the internet, before YouTube, before most social media. The transmission started on C-SPAN, made it to Democracy Now! And Fugly.com, and for weeks after I would get an email with the subject line, "Have you seen this?" There was me in that clip. Let me back up and tell the story. This is breaking history. As they say in this digital space, like, share, and subscribe. I'm Mark Trahant. More than 8,000 people were in Washington for the Unity Journalists of Color Convention, a mix of the National Association of Black Journalists, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the Asian American Journalists Association, and the Native American Journalists Association. I had been involved with the coalition from the beginning, so I was really willing to take on any task. In 1984, for example, at the first convention, they asked me to produce a town hall, and I did that. 5 years later in Seattle in 1994, I was on a panel interviewing then Vice President Al Gore. I asked him questions about what kind of president he would be. For what it's worth, I asked about diversity and access to technology. So it was no big deal when I was sought out to be on a panel questioning President George W. Bush. I figured it would be a rare opportunity to explore the roots of tribal sovereignty. I remember thinking, how do I tap into the president's thinking? I wanted an answer that would come from him, not from some carefully drafted statement from a policy statement from an intern at the White House. I wanted his thinking. Can I make my question personal? Would that help make the answer relevant and specific?
Here we play the questioning by Mark Trahant. He is the editorial page editor of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, former president of the Native American Journalists Association, questioning President Bush.
Most school kids learn about government in the context of city, county, state, and federal. And of course, tribal governments are not part of that at all. Mr. President, you've been a governor and a president, so you have a unique experience looking at it from two directions. What do you think tribal sovereignty means in the 21st century, and how do we resolve conflicts between tribes and the federal and state governments?
Yeah. Tribal sovereignty means that. It's sovereign. I mean, you've been given sovereignty, and you're viewed as a sovereign entity.
Okay.
And therefore, the relationship between the federal government and tribes is one between sovereign entities. Now, the federal government has got a responsibility on matters like education and security to help, and health care. And it's a solemn duty. And from this perspective, we must continue to uphold that duty. I think that one of the most promising areas of all is to help with economic development. And that means helping people understand what it means to start a business. That's why the Small Business Administration's increased loans. It means, obviously, encouraging capital flows. But none of that will happen unless the education systems flourish and are strong, and that's why I told you we've spent $1.1 billion in the reconstruction of Native American schools.
Stunned, I didn't know what to say. I will never forget Bush's eyes. He was deeply uncomfortable. I did spit out, okay, but the audience was less kind. A low rumble laughter replaced applause. A few minutes later, sitting in the front row, was the Reverend Jesse Jackson. He motioned to me, "I got to talk to you." So I went down after the session, then he launched into his own impression of Bush.
As you saw today at the President's Conference, the leader of the free world does not understand tribal sovereignty. What would you do, in your estimation, Reverend, what would you do, and how would you advise tribes to educate our folks just exactly what tribal sovereignty is?
The president explained. You just didn't understand. Sovereignty is sovereign. You understand? It's like in sovereignty. If you're on the reservation, you've been sovereigized. Your PhD is in sovereignization. You understand? I mean, I don't think you understand. What?
You're right. I didn't understand that.
Well, needless to say that the sovereignty of Native American tribes are federally protected rights. And as long as Native Americans were perishing on those reservations, it didn't matter to states. But now that you have gaming on the reservations and economic development on the reservations, indeed in some states voting on the reservations, the state now wants to impose itself on the federally protected sovereignty of the states. It has nothing to do with education per se. It has to do with a legal relationship between federally constructed contracts or treaties, and states do not have the right to interfere with those federal territories. That is the real answer to that.
The internet transmitted Bush's gaffe instantly. The sovereignty clip was probably copied from C-SPAN before President Bush had even walked off the stage. I started getting email attachments immediately with a subject line that said, "You've got to see this." But if you only read the words, it's neither conveys Bush's lost stare nor his inarticulate response. You have to see it. And that clip went viral because it had become simple to duplicate a video with only a few keystrokes. The technology had changed. The technology made the story. Even now, Bush on sovereignty remains popular on YouTube and the funny old videos found across the net. In fact, one's called fugly.com. There have been multiple viewings on The Daily Show and The Colbert Report. It's been all over the place. The popularity of the internet clip was a window into how people viewed President Bush. It's seen as proof about his lack of intelligence and his inarticulateness. But when it comes to American Indian policy, it's also a metaphor about how this nation views the complicated relationship and the promises made to its first citizens. My first thought was, where was his staff? This was the President of the United States, and he was going to a convention that included Native American journalists. How could he not be briefed to have some of the basic understandings? How could he be so unprepared? You know, if you want to get technical, the first part of his answer is spot on. Sovereignty is sovereignty. But boy, after that, he got confused and he explained himself and it got worse and worse. He was unclear about the fundamentals of the relationship, which is government to government. Then Bush isn't the only president to get confused.
Mr. President, I heard that a group of American Indians have come here because they couldn't meet you in the United States of America. If you fail to meet them here, will you be able to improve, to correct it, and to meet them back in the United States?
I didn't know that they had asked to see me if they've come here or whether to see them there. I'd be very happy to see them. Let me tell you just a little something about the American Indian in our land. We have provided millions of acres of land for what are called the preservations, or the reservations, I should say. They from the beginning, announced that they wanted to maintain their way of life as they had always lived there in the desert and the plains and so forth. And we set up these reservations so they could, and have a Bureau of Indian Affairs to help take care of them. At the same time, we provide education for them, schools on the reservations, and they are free also to leave the reservations and be American citizens among the rest of us, and many do. Some still prefer, however, that early way of life. And we've done everything we can to meet their demands as to how they want to live. Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we should not have humored them in that wanting to stay in that kind of primitive lifestyle. Maybe we should have said, no, come join us, be citizens, along with the rest of us. As I say, many have been very successful. And I'm very pleased to meet with them, talk with them at any time, and see what their grievances are or what they feel they might be. You'd be surprised. Some of them became very wealthy because some of those reservations were overlaying great pools of oil, and you can get very rich pumping oil. And so I don't know what their complaint might be.
Made a mistake? Humored us with a primitive lifestyle? A Bureau of Indian Affairs to take care of us? Come on. Reagan articulated so many crazy ideas. One that every American has the same rights. It's a rational, logical posit, but it misses a unique history. American Indians have a different legal status because of two basic ideas. Tribes are sovereign governments that were here before there was a United States. And second, today's Native Americans are still citizens of these political units. Compare that to what most of us are taught in school. We learn about our neighbors' forms of government, the city, the county, the state, and the federal government. Tribes are really not a part of that. We are left out of the conversation, and few people understand tribes' unique roles. The legal framework of this nation cements that notion. Treaties were documented promises signed between two governments. The United States agreed to educate Native Americans or send a doctor to the reservation, and tribes agreed to give up title to millions of acres of land. The preeminent status of these pacts is recorded in the U.S. Constitution, which says treaties are the supreme law of the land. This is the broader global story. It's about how a community, a tribe, a nation governs itself, with or without the help of a larger power. A few months after that Bush video, Viggo Mortensen and the guitarist Buckethead produced an album called Intelligence Failures.
Sovereignty means that. It's sovereign. You've been given sovereignty and you're viewed as a sovereign entity. And therefore, the relationship between the federal government and between sovereign entities.
They used another clip of Bush asking, "By our actions, we've shown what kind of nation we are." That's exactly right. What kind of nation we are. It's only by those actions that we can judge. A point even more critical in 2025, when the current president is instructing museums, libraries, and universities about the kind of history that should be taught. I have no doubt that sovereignty would be left out of that conversation. If you're interested in more content like this, be sure to subscribe to Indigenous House on YouTube. I'm Mark Trahant, and this is Breaking History.